We have some major news coming out of Leafs land today as a couple of our prospects in Easton, Cowan, and Fraser Minten were named to the preliminary World Junior roster, so we'll break that down in this episode, as well as the salary cap for the NHL is planning to increase next year, and this could have huge implications for the Maple Leafs going forward, so stay tuned for all that. Before we do get into the video, thank you guys for allowing us to hit 5,000 subscribers. Your support's been unbelievable. Quick reminder, hit the subscribe button again. 80% of you guys who are watching right now aren't subscribed, so scroll down, and if you aren't subscribed, hit the button. It would mean a lot to me and Darius. All right, Darius, we have a ton to discuss today. There's a bunch of different news. Nothing crazy today, but some good stuff. So we'll start with the first topic, which is this is big for the Leafs. Now, we'll start with the salary cap thing. We'll just get that out of the way first because this is kind of the biggest news regarding not only the Maple Leafs, but the NHL as well, as the NHL salary cap is estimated to increase by $4 million next season. Now, we can get into details about how this could affect the Leafs, how it could affect the rest of the NHL, even Nylander to a degree. What are your thoughts on Gary Bettman doing this and deciding to make this call? I'll pop up the article in a second, but I just want to get your opinion on this first and how it could be very big for the Leafs and Brad Treliving going forward.
I think it's about time.
Yeah.
I think since 2019, before COVID, the salary cap has not increased, or if it has, it's been by maybe $1 million at a time.
Not much.
No, we've seen seasons in the past where it would go up $4 million, $5 million at once. And now it's sitting at 82 and a half or something like that. And it's, finally projected to go up 4 million, which helps a lot. Without getting into details, this helps the Leafs, stay competitive next year, and it helps them sign Nylander. Let's just put it that way. It makes it so they can actually stay competitive and not have to sacrifice. And the same goes for other teams. I think the reason we're not seeing a lot of blockbusters, especially for the Leafs, even though they can pull off these moves, is because of the salary cap. So with that flexibility coming in next year, and it's pretty significant, $4 million is a lot in one season. So with that flexibility coming in, it's really nice to see just league wide. Forget the Leafs. It's really nice.
Yeah, and I agree. And like you said, basically Gary Bettman goes on to talk about this. He said the state of the league is very strong as they make the biggest single season jump the cap has ever made, or the biggest has been 4.5 million. The game is in great shape. Franchises have never been better owned, stronger, all that stuff. And regarding the Leafs, like you said, it has a huge impact for them. It has a huge impact for the league. And we'll probably delve into it more in future videos about Nylander. But just in general, especially for a team like the Leafs, they have some interesting contract situations coming up. And it's pretty good timing for them depending on how they plan to make those, moves going forward. But in general, it's about time it happened. It'll help the Leafs a ton. It'll help other teams a ton. And overall, it'll just be a good decision. Any final thoughts on that before we move on to an interesting one as well?
I think it just opens the door for a lot more now going forward for everyone in the league, especially the Leafs. I think the Leafs are a team that they can pay whoever they want, really. If there's no salary cap tomorrow, they can do whatever they wanted. So I think it's exciting that, season after season now we'll be seeing these significant increases. So it's just exciting for the fact that we can see bigger trades now.
Yeah, I was going to say it'll get better and better. And for Brad Treliving, I'm sure he's probably one of the ones who's more happy about this, especially given the Nylander stuff and what could happen going forward. So that's big for him. And I suspect in a year time or whenever this gets implemented, we'll be happy that it happened. Now, let's get into the second one. Now, Darius, Minten and Cowan were just named to the World Junior preliminary roster. These are two guys that we've discussed about before on the channel, specifically Fraser Minten, who had a very, very impressive 2023 in general. Now, any quick thoughts on this? Obviously, prospects Easton, Cowan, and Fraser Minten are named to Canada's preliminary roster for the World Juniors. I love to see this. It's always great to see these Leafs players, especially when the Leafs aren't playing for 5 days. So this is kind of the biggest news that's going on right now. But I think Minten and Cowan, that matter, are going to have big impacts going forward for this team. So it'll be good to see them, assuming they make the roster on playing for the World Juniors.
Yeah, and I think they'll both make the roster. And I don't think Fraser Minten making it was a huge surprise.
No.
Didn't make it last year, but he's a 19-year-old forward back in the WHL now. So it was no real surprise. You see a lot of the older guys usually make the team. So, and he had a great showing in the NHL as well in the preseason and the regular season for that matter.
Yep.
Played a couple of games in the NHL. So no real surprise that he made the team. But I think somewhat of a surprise is coming into the season, at least, is Easton Cowan. And he's like a top scorer for the London Knights right now in the Ontario Hockey League. He got sent back to junior and just got shot out of a rocket. He had a good year last year. The Leafs picked him. They're like, oh, he's a promising prospect. He, had a great training camp. And then he gets shot out of a rocket here in the first half of this OHL season. He has been spectacular, and I think he will make this team. He is a feisty player. He's putting up a lot of points, and it's nice to see a Leafs prospect with that. And it's like you said, just watching Leafs prospects in the World Juniors, especially for the home nation Canada, it's really nice.
Yeah, and again, Minten, we kind of assumed that was going to happen, especially given how well he was. And both of these guys are going to have impacts for the Leafs going forward. And you briefly mentioned it. Fraser Minten, phenomenal preseason, solid start to the season, and it made sense at the time to obviously send him back down, get him some more reps. And I think this is just another step in his hopefully continued growth towards the NHL level. And I mean, you covered Cowan as good as I could have as well. He's exciting me. He's been one of the guys who's been on many headlines regarding Leafs prospects, and I think he could be one that we look at now in a couple years, as this was kind of the big first step for him before and working towards that NHL developmental goal. Now let's stay on the topic of prospects now, and I want to get your thoughts on a couple of these guys. Could call-ups be incoming? A lot of articles are going down. Darius, no trades have happened yet regarding the blue line for the Maple Leafs, at least. Obviously Nikita Zadorov, they know, and we know they have Chris Tanev on their mind, but they need to address this soon, and if they aren't going to address it via trade, could they address it via promoting a prospect? Now, there's a couple guys we'll discuss. I'll let you start and just discuss whichever one you want to start first. You can pause and read the article if you're watching this video now. We have Mikko and we have Topi. Which one are you higher on? Do you think calling up one of these prospects is a good idea, or do you think they need to improve it via trade? Because this article seems to think that if they call up one of these prospects, maybe it could work as a band-aid while they work on a trade.
Well, let's start on the trade front, right? Zadorov just got moved. We covered that in a previous video. It's unfortunate. It would have been nice to get them as a package, but I think if you're Brad Treliving, to bring in Tanev would be okay, but he's another just okay defenseman. I think the package would have been nice to bolster the blue line. So you got to look at bigger fish. If you want to go for a trade now, you got to look at a big fish. You got to get somebody who's going to push Brody down. You got to get somebody who's going to play with Morgan Riley. So I think if they're going to fix it via trade, they have to look for a bigger fish now. But like you said, if you want to look at prospects, and I think they should explore that in the next couple of weeks, especially just see what you have in the system. One guy that impressed me in the preseason, you brought him up, is Mikko Kalkinen. Not the biggest scorer, okay? He's played a really big sample size so far this season, not putting up a lot of points, but he's really good defensively. He knows where to be positionally. He was really sound, I thought, in the preseason. Unfortunately, just didn't make the team. But like Sheldon Keefe said, he surprised him in the preseason. I think he surprised a lot of people. He's one of the better defensive defensemen right now for the Marlies, and he's having a pretty solid season. I think it would be wise to see what you have in him at the NHL level. And then on top of that, like you mentioned, Topi Niemela, really good Finnish player. Dubas was really high on this guy. There was a lot of, mock trades the last couple of years with this guy involved. Did not want to trade him, and I'm glad he didn't. I mean, he has 12 points in 17 games in the AHL. The AHL is really hard to score in, especially as a defenseman. So he's playing really well so far this season. I think you got to give him a look at the NHL level too. He has performed at the AHL level. I think you have to just, promote him, see what he can do at the NHL level. Not that it's easier to score at the NHL, but you're playing with a higher quality caliber of players, right? So I would really like to see. I'm most excited about Niemela long term. He's younger. I think he has more of an upside. So I'm really excited to see Niemela. Hopefully they give him a shot. But I think if they're going to call up anyone first, it is Kalkinen.
Yeah, I agree with the second part there. Niemela, however you pronounce it, I always mess up his name. He's better for the long-term future. Yeah. And according to this article, and you kind of mentioned, there's no real risk here is what they say. The Leafs should give them each a game in the top four and see how it goes. Obviously, I guess there is a risk to a degree, is that you call them up too early, stunt their development, whatever. But I think at this point, if you're the Maple Leafs, the blue line is so in shambles that you need to try something. And if that's not going to come via trade because the trade deadline is so far away, then you need to change something up. Obviously, the Leafs are treading water. They're doing okay. They've had a pretty decent season, but Joseph Wall's having to battle his butt off every single game to stop the amount of shots that are coming through. So I think they need to make some sort of move, and this would be one that doesn't require any trade. And I'd rather this than them greatly overpay for a pending UFA like Chris Tanev at this point. I'd rather them go and swing for the fences for one of the bigger guys like we've touched on in previous videos. But I agree with you. Hopefully one of them get called up. And any final thoughts before we wrap up? It's an interesting time. The games are just spread apart like crazy. So
Yeah, their schedule is messed up this year. It's not fun. Way too many breaks in between. It's hard to get into it. But I was going to say, no better time to get these guys acclimated into the NHL than a random Thursday night game against the worst team in the Eastern Conference. So why not do it this week? And I think if throwing guys into the fire, that's like in the playoffs and maybe early in the season. Halfway through the season in December, I think it's just see what they got. I don't think there's any better time to see what you got in the system at the NHL level than right now. So why not just put them out there, see what they can do with the higher quality of player in the NHL.
And especially with the way that the current blue line of defense is playing, I feel like fans would be happy to see some new players, even if they don't even play well, just to see them out there, to see a change of scenery. But that'll wrap up the video. Let us know what your thoughts are on this. A lot of news to go down, but hopefully the Leafs will play soon and their schedule will start to sort itself out. But thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.